question yesterday. The Torah tells us Yisro took Tzipora, the wife of Moshe, Veshnei Voneo, and her two sons. One's name was Gershom, and one's name was Eliezer. So I asked the question. It should have said, Asher Shemo Echad Gershom, V'Shem Hasheni Eliezer. The first name was Gershom, who was the Bechor, the firstborn, and the second one was Eliezer. Firstly, why is it important to know why he named them? The reason why he gave them the names. Okay? Evidently, when it says the name of one of them was Gershom, it's important for us to know why he named him Gershom. And it's important for us to know why he named him Eliezer. Otherwise, what relevance does it have? He brought two of his sons. One's name was Gershom, and the second one's name is Eliezer. But yet the Torah feels it's important. It must tell us the background of these names. Why were they named that? The reason is, the first one is to signify and connote that he's a stranger in an alien land. The second one, to connote and acknowledge, Elokei Ovi Be'ezri, the God of my father came to my aid. It's important for us to know. When children carry that name, the Torah is telling us when he would acknowledge or think about Gershom, which is his Bechor, what would he think? What would be in the forefront of his mind? I'm a stranger in an alien land. When he would think about Eliezer, the significance of that name was that he should always remember Elokei Ovi Be'ezri. The God of my father came to my assistance, and he saved me from never to forget that. Always to remember that. Because we had asked, sequentially speaking, they're out of order. First, he was saved from the sword of Paro, as Rashi says, that when he killed the Egyptian, the verdict was he should be decapitated, beheaded, and Hashem performed the miracle that his neck became like a pillar of marble, and he did not die. And then subsequently he fled, and he was a stranger in an alien land. So why is it sequentially it's out of order? The answer is the Torah is not telling us. That is not exactly the value of naming each one's name. So we'd mentioned that when a person goes to any environment, especially if it's not his own environment, for the sake of survival, people acclimate themselves very quickly. On a subliminal, subconscious level, we acclimate ourselves. The moment you allow yourself to acclimate yourself, you're vulnerable to the influences of that location. Moshe understood, being in this alien environment, he doesn't want to be affected even as much as an iota. Therefore, the firstborn, which is the Bechor, which is the most special to the father, to acknowledge that reality, to always remember, never to forget, Geris Beres Nochrio. The second son, never forget what Hashem had done for him. Elokei Ovi Be'ezri, the God of my father came to my assistance. Always to acknowledge that, to always be beholden to Hashem, that he's alive only because of that miracle, never to forget that. So if we would speak about the first son and the second son, so the first son is A, the second son is B. Here, each son in his own right has a value to acknowledge a different point. The first is acknowledge, this is not my place. I will always remember I'm a stranger in an alien location. So Echad is not because he's the first. Echad means each one has his own level of representation to always to acknowledge something. The second one is another level, but it's not second. Each one is as important as the first. Therefore, each one of the sons are identified as Echad. Shema Echad A and Shema Echad B. Because they're not B, both of them are A, because each one has its own value to always be cognizant of what each one represents. So therefore, it's Shema Echad Gershom, Shema Echad Eliezer for that reason. I once told over a story that Napoleon, when he wanted to conquer Pressburg was known as the museum piece of Europe. It was an ancient city, everything was built, the architecture, everything was beauty. And he told them that if they don't surrender, he's going to put his cannons on the other side of the river and he will destroy every structure in Pressburg. And he did. And this was the community of the Chassam Sofer. And when they received this warning, the people left the community, went into the inner part of the country, and he leveled every structure in Pressburg. He destroyed it. It took a number of years. They rebuilt. And, Hungarians, Czechoslovakians, they built in the most ornate quality. It was something magnificent, what they had rebuilt. So it came the date. They set a date for the celebration, inauguration of the new community. The yeshiva, the shuls, the homes, everything. To thank Hashem for what he had done for them, to be able to rebuild even more beautiful than was before. And they had music, and they had speakers, and everybody was speaking, giving their thanks to Hashem for whatever happened. The Chassam Sofer gets up, and he breaks down crying. And they couldn't understand. They thought initially maybe he was overwhelmed with emotion. People cry out of joy. And he says, you don't understand. Until now, I believed these were the Chevlei Mashiach. This was an indication that Mashiach was coming. The end was near. And now I realize Hashem allowed us to rebuild. We're going to be here for another 500 years. God forbid. So it's like a bittersweet pill. On one hand, we rebuilt. On the other hand, the news is not so great. We're here for a while. But factually, when you say, Baruch Hashem, we're here, and that, it's coupled with this certain level of complacency, and it's okay because things are great. The moment you say you have that complacency, things are great, what happens? You become vulnerable, and you let your guard down, and you don't feel that you're an alien culture, alien community. This is my place to a degree. As a result of that, you become susceptible at a certain subliminal level to the values of that particular location. We find in Europe, it's very interesting, the Austrian Hungarian emperor, his name was Franz Josef. He was very good to the Jews. And that's why in Hungary, the Jews spoke Hungarian. All Jews were fluent in Hungarian. In Poland, because of the anti-Semitism, the Catholic Church, they were so anti-Semitic, and the Jews were always discriminated, and there was overt anti-Semitism there. And besides, the Poles were like a lowly people. So the Jews looked down at them. Jews did not speak Polish. The Polish they spoke was only enough to get by through their interactions with the non-Jews. But the Jews primarily spoke among themselves, they spoke Yiddish. In Hungary, Jews spoke Hungarian among themselves. Women did not speak Yiddish. The women only spoke Hungarian. The men spoke Yiddish because the men who went to yeshiva, they would study in Yiddish. But in terms of the vernacular, the language which they spoke, because there was a very positive feeling towards their homeland, so to say. They felt they were treated well and they were dedicated. The moment in Hungary you had a reform movement, they became acculturated. In Poland, the Jews not become acculturated. Because of the divide, the separation, the way the Jews were treated, the way they saw the Polish people, they would not want to be anything which they represent. So that influence in Poland didn't exist. In Hungary, on the other hand, they made tremendous inroads. There was tremendous spiritual erosion in the Hungarian community unless they really fortified themselves. But despite all the fortification and all the precaution, because of the relationship with the populace and everything else, it's inevitable there's some level of of influence. Moshe himself understood, especially who he was, and the way he'd be acknowledged and valued, he'd be vulnerable to this. Gary Yisberes Nachrio. I'm a stranger in an alien country. I don't belong here. So even though this event happened after the first event, to survive, that's first and foremost, that's the first thing a person has to have in mind.
Bye-bye.